for me, and I think for a lot of, especially designers and makers and creative people, um, doing writing, even if you don't publish it, although I think it's good if you publish it, doing writing helps you figure out what you think, right? Because you can, I think people underestimate or perhaps overestimate how clear something is in their head until they sit down and actually try and write about it. It's like, wow, I maybe haven't made my mind up about this at all.
Hi, everyone. It's Corey, and I'm here with Scott Kubie. He's a digital strategist, public speaker, workshop teacher. He's the lead content strategist at Brain Traffic, which is an interesting company that helps organizations build and implement strategy for their content, getting it out there, how they operate, getting the content out there. But I'm mostly excited to talk with you today, Scott, about your book that you recently released called Writing for Designers. So maybe you could just kind of start a little bit talking about this book and why the heck you decided to start writing it.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me here, Corey.
Yeah.
The book is about how to get the writing done. And that was really kind of the genesis of it and what made me want to write the book. I have worked in communications, marketing, content strategy for a number of years now. And obviously I pay attention to the industry and I look for articles and I go to conference talks, and I'm very interested in like how we create good writing for websites, for applications, marketing content, and so on. And what I have found is that there was a lot of writing out there, a lot of kind of meta writing about writing, and it's frequently about what good writing is. So it's very focused on the what. Even if the name of the article is how, right? It'll say how to write for the web. But if you really read it, it's about what to write for the web. It's advice like use plain language, have short headings, break up your text and make it scannable, which is all good advice. Like those are good editorial standards. But what I found in a lot of my work is that especially big organizations, the companies struggle with the process, even down at the individual level of, okay, you assign someone the writing, how do they get that writing done? And so that was the book I wanted to write. And working with the Book Apart, they're a great publisher for web design, digital marketing, developer type audiences. And so we kind of focused it in on designers as the specific audience for the book.
Okay.
But for me, it's really kind of for anyone, just about how to get that writing work done.
Okay, interesting. And then one thing I noticed too that was interesting about Book Apart is that it's a brief book, which is actually like it's kind of a nice way to digest it. I guess.
Yeah. It was certainly a challenge. I think the first draft I turned in was about twice as long as they were looking for because I just couldn't help myself. But it's, as a consumer of books and as someone who has, a stack over here of web and design books that I have not gotten all the way through yet. I think there is something nice about that format of, even on a short flight in the Midwest, you can probably get my book read, Minneapolis to Chicago. And I think that's a nice thing.
Great. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to check it out, but excited to do that. Is there like a good place that we can find it?
Yeah, for sure. So if you go to abookapart.com, and I'm sure there's a short URL that I'm not remembering offhand, but it's in the briefs collection there and easy to find. And I also have kind of an introduction and a video intro on my website, which is kubie.co/WFD, Writing for Designers.
Okay, cool. So is it more about like copywriting, or how do we because I know copywriting is sometimes like, not necessarily grammatical. It's like short sentences, which is a lot different than say like writing a novel or a book for entertainment. So like, what is the difference there for you? And as you're trying to explain it to designers?
Sure. So the categories that I drew up that have just made sense to me in my own work is there's marketing copy, there's kind of interface copy, and there's product copy. So for me, marketing is often pretty far removed from the core product, right? That's sending out a sales or promotional email. That's writing guest posts for a blog. There's stuff that's a little closer to the metal of product content. So support documentation, app store descriptions, stuff for the change log, maybe how-to articles or explanations of features. So things that are like really like support the infrastructure of the product. And then there's the interface writing or the interface copy, which to me is the stuff where if you took those words out, the interface would break, right? It would be no different than pulling off a button or a link. So these are the things that are part and parcel with the product. And each of those requires slightly different skill sets, slightly different approaches to writing them. And there are frequently different goals, right? So with marketing copy, you're trying to persuade. With interface copy, you're trying to make things as explicit and usable as possible. And that product content is kind of in between, where you want to set it like you're establishing the voice and tone of the product often, and sort of putting rhetoric in there about how you want people to think about it, setting that big picture of like how to like helping them understand the thing that they're using. And then the interface stuff is helping them use the thing they're using. The nice thing and what makes the book work, at least in my opinion, is that the overall process for writing any of that stuff is the same. Okay. Right? You have to figure out what your goals are. You have to scope out the assignment. Like, what are the hard edges of what all it is that I have to write for this? Mm-hmm. You're thinking about the audience. You're establishing communication goals. You're writing it, editing it, improving it, refining it, collaborating with people, getting sign off, shipping it, integrating it. So, whether it's big picture marketing stuff or even little interface copy, it's often very similar.
Okay. And is there like a suggested way for like how to get this done? So you have all these different types of things. Is there like how do you come up with like templates or checklists, or you know what I mean? Or is that necessary? How do you kind of work on all this stuff together?
I think it's very necessary. I think so a word that gets used a lot in design processes is fidelity, right? So if you can do like a low fidelity sketch of something on a whiteboard, you can do a really high fidelity mock-up of a complicated interface, and you can fake the animations if you really want to demonstrate how something's supposed to work. And I think one's approach to their writing assignments can be similar. So you can do it in a really low fidelity way of like grab a piece of notebook paper, create a little quad. I lay out a framework of prepare, compose, edit, and finish. So get ready to write, do the writing, edit and refine the writing, and then that's where novelists get to call it a day. And then digital work, we have this last phase of finishing, which is reintegrating it into the product, getting the approvals, adding it to inventories, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So I think especially in digital writing and design work, that first stage, prepare, part of the writer's job is to answer those questions that you're asking. Like, how am I going to approach this? What is it going to mean to be done? What is my assignment? What tools am I going to use to accomplish this? An example being for interface writing, something that's very common is like using a spreadsheet to create an inventory of the messages in your interface, which is a lot easier to manage than having it all locked away in sketch files or InDesign or whatever else.
That's a good idea.
So there's different tools and templates that apply in different scenarios.
Okay. And then I know personally for me too, is like I can spend literally hours writing the same sentence, like trying to get it just right. And it's like, when do I know I'm done? Like sometimes you have a deadline, so you don't really have a choice, which is probably a good thing. But when it comes to that edit phase, I'm always like, oh, it could be this, it could be that. Like, what's the trick? Like, how do you decide when to be done, or how do you know when you've nailed it?
Sure. So I don't know that there's a trick for every situation. I mean, I think there's a few that work. If you are at the interface level, user acceptance testing should be part of your process. And if you can run it past actual human people and it makes enough sense to them that they aren't confused and it doesn't disrupt their flow, that's great. There's some I really like the book Content Design by Sarah Richards, which gets into other kind of nitty-gritty parts of building out the content, and a lot of lightweight testing that she recommends of just like, have someone read something, tell you like, have them give you a summary, of it,
Yeah.
right? Like, what do you think this was about? And if they're giving you the right answers, you're good to go.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
that's a
as
good point.
far as yeah, accuracy is big. Like, there's a framework I have in the book of accuracy, then clarity, then brevity. One way you're done is this totally true? Another way you're done is this as clear as we are capable of making it? And then finally, like, is this as short as it can reasonably be? And it's important to do those in that order too. An anecdote I relate in the book and a lot of my talks and workshops is I worked at a place where the UX director was obsessed with brevity, right? Because that was the feedback that they knew to give on writing. It's like, can't we make it shorter? Can't we make it shorter? And as
Mhm.
the writer, I often had to push back and say, we can make it shorter, but at that point, it's going to become less clear. Right. So there's a balancing act there of that accuracy, the clarity, and the brevity. And there's a little bit of an art to it, I think, to get a feel for that over time.
Yeah.
But the big one is involving other people. It's easier. You got to get out of your own head at some point, run it past other people, run it past the folks that you're collaborating with, ask your mom to read it, whatever. But get it out of your head
Yeah, you're right.
and into someone else's.
Yeah, it's a good reminder because like products, it's the same thing too. You can overthink things, and the sooner you can get it in people's hands, the better off it is, anyways. But I think, yeah, and like the messaging, the buttons, what's on there, just do your best and then get it out there and get some feedback right away is usually a better way to go about it. Um, so anyways, so this is awesome, like the digital writing, but like, how did you become a writer yourself? I mean, do you consider yourself a writer? Obviously you're involved in the content strategy, but like literally writing, how did you get into that yourself?
Well, I feel like you're asking two good and slightly different questions.
Okay.
So I got started writing, um, I think in part because I mean, it's a little silly, but like, I hated my handwriting when I was a kid. Like, it bothered me. It's like this is a problem that makers have, right? Where like little kid me, like my aesthetic taste was like outpaced my own ability to manipulate a pen, right? So my handwriting is awful. I hated it. And when I was pretty young, we got a secondhand, I think it was an Apple IIe computer in the house, and it had a word processing program on it. And I just felt so empowered because like I could write the things I wanted to write and they looked clean and nice, which was very
Yeah.
important to me apparently.
Yeah.
And so I just started writing little stories. Like, I think I wrote, this wasn't a term of art then, I don't think, but basically like fan fiction for like Sherlock Holmes and Star
Cool.
Trek and other things I was into when I was a kid. So I wrote fiction when I was a kid. Middle school, high school, like I taught myself HTML and was building websites like in like things that were like prototypes of blogs. Um, and for me, like, writing has always been something that supports projects. Like, I got a lot of experience writing because I was doing things out in the world. So I started a pop-up art market with some friends, like for indie makers and crafters. And so you have to promote it, and you have to write press releases about it, and you have to put up Facebook events and copy for it. I worked for a music industry nonprofit. We do not have any marketers or writers on staff. So I had to write grants. I had to write our website. I had to write bios. I had to write, descriptions of the bands for the festivals that we were organizing. Everything that I was doing involved writing. And so that was just a skill and competency that I built over by necessity over time.
Mhm.
Is that everything I was doing involved writing. As I sit here today, I'm a writer in the sense that I wrote a book. I'm a writer in the sense that a lot of my work like involves writing. I think philosophically, maybe I think of myself more as a designer,
Mhm.
and I think of words as a design material. So in like agency world, there's a very common distinction of art and copy, right? So you could become an art director with a design background, you become an art director with a copywriting background. And that was like very natural in the ad world. And I feel like only very recently is that becoming more common
Mhm.
in the digital design world and the product design world, where there are now, okay, we had UX designers for a very long time. And
Mhm.
hey, what would it mean if we had UX writers?
Mhm.
And what would it mean if we had user interface writers and people that specialized in this stuff? And we realized it wasn't all just about flows and wireframes and animations. So in that sense, I guess I'm a writer, but in the kind of design tradition of to
Yeah.
me, If words get the job done, great. If a picture gets the job done, that's great too. I don't feel precious about it. And I actually think that's important. One thing that's a little bit of a pet peeve for me is that a lot of people from a writerly background can sometimes be kind of snooty about it, especially when they work with people that aren't very comfortable with writing. I personally, I get it. It's fun to joke about, but like, I don't think having very strong opinions about Oxford commas like makes you very interesting. And it is certainly not like helping people on your team feel more comfortable about writing. One of the very specific choices I made in working on my book is that I don't talk about grammar at all. So like I don't talk about participles or gerunds or adverbs or any of that stuff because it's kind of scary and a lot of it's kind of wonky. And honestly, I don't understand all that stuff very well, and I still have people pay me money to write things.
Right.
So
hey, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think there's something about writing how you like your personality. Almost writing like how you talk in some sense. Like you don't have to be overly professional or overly engineering. It's just about writing conversationally almost. That's usually what goes over better, I guess, especially with digital products if they're like lifestyle products.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I'm so grateful to work with editors and people who do understand all of those things and can help keep me from putting my foot in my mouth, especially when it's an important piece of work like a blog post that carries my company's name or a book, right? The first draft of that thing before an editor touched it, I would not have wanted that out in the world. So it's an important skill, but I think as a community, as a professional design community, I think we're doing people a disservice if we make them feel like they have to have that kind of like grammatical AP style expertise to get the writing done. You don't have to do that, right? In the same way that we know you don't have to be a master at Photoshop or Illustrator to grab a whiteboard marker and sketch out some product ideas. So it's my hope that a little of what my book can do and just some of my teaching and speaking work can do is make, quote unquote normies who don't think of themselves as writers a little more comfortable getting some writing done.
Awesome. Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you're doing too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, but that was kind of exactly what my next question was just going to be is like, what advice or, why should people write basically? Like, is that something that you think people should do?
Yeah, I really think they should. If your life's going perfect and you're not writing, maybe you don't need it. But for me, and I think for a lot of, especially designers and makers and creative people, doing writing, even if you don't publish it, although I think it's good if you publish it, doing writing helps you figure out what you think, right? Because you can. I think people underestimate or perhaps overestimate how clear something is in their head until they sit down and actually try and write about it. It's like, wow, I maybe haven't made my mind up about this at all. Or if you're trying to you're writing to explain a process or a thing that you have been consulting on or a product space that you're in, and you start to write about the problems that people in that audience have. And it's like, I'm actually maybe not as articulate about this as I thought I was. So if you do the writing, you get better at talking about all this stuff, right? And writing is you think and you type. And it can be more complicated than that, but that's really it. It's typing out your thoughts. So forcing yourself to write, getting more practice writing is thinking in an intentional way, and that's never a bad thing, especially for product people and makers and designers.
Cool. Well, Scott, we're just about out of time. I really appreciate you. That went by quick.
I talk a lot. Yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. A lot of good things that you have here. I'm excited. I need to take a look at writing for designers. So definitely, like, if you haven't heard about this, I'm glad that we were able to chat with you and share it with others out there. And hopefully now we can be a little more, I don't know. I think talking to you has helped me kind of realize, like, not to put so much pressure on myself, especially, and to get things out there. So
for sure. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to playing more with Blurred. I hope people are checking it out. For my money, I talked about the book being 120 pages. A lot of what they made me cut out was like all of my nerdery about writing tools and things, which just very reasonable because it just didn't quite fit the scope of the book. But I love that stuff, and I think anything that that's often a starting point in my recommendations to potentially new writers is like give yourself permission to like try out something new and fun, right? If
Mhm.
writing in Microsoft Word or writing in the editor for your CMS isn't fun, find a place that is fun to write, and it'll be that much more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. And like that's kind of my thinking too is like people, if they're great writers, they don't need a tool. They just need a notepad and paper. But hopefully, if you aspire to write or you need some kind of tool to help you along, then I'm hopeful Blurt does that for people. But so,
Yeah.
anyways,
Well,
yeah, again,
I mean, that's such a, just, I'm
yeah, yeah, sure,
stretching this out. I apologize. But,
sure,
you get the whole thing around like, oh, like a chef can cook a meal in any kitchen. And, like a writer just needs a notepad or type anywhere. Like, sure. But like professional chefs have amazing tools.
right.
Right.
Good
So
point.
I think being intentional about your tools is a hallmark of a good craftsperson. And something that, if you're using that as an excuse to not write because you don't
Mhm.
have the tools, that's bad. But if you're serious about it, by all means, embrace the tools and find ones that work for you.
For sure, for sure. All right, Scott. Thanks again. If you are looking for another great read, definitely go check out Writing for Designers. Scott has a website. It's Kubie, KUBIE.co. And he's on Twitter. And he's got a lot of other cool things going on with brain traffic. So go out there and check it out. And we'll be talking again soon. All right, take care.
Thanks.